This episode of Settle the Score is sponsored by Sky Sports. Stream Sky Sports flexibly on Now. What you want, when you want, no fuss. Go to nowtv.com to start streaming Sky Sports today. Hello and welcome to Settle the Score. My name is Ari Durham. Who predicted 4-1 in the North London derby? I think for the time being, North London is red. I mean, Eberici Eze, I doff my cap to you. I doff my cap. There was something just so beautiful about him scoring a hat-trick against Tottenham, especially after everything that happened in the summer. Joining me now to look back on the North London derby is Tom Canton from The Gooner Talk and Chris Cowlin from Spurs Chat. Tom, are you starting to believe? I know we're only at the back end of November. We know that Arsenal are famous and Arsenal fans are famous for counting their chickens too early. Can we categorically say, I mean, not categorically because we're so far away from May, do you believe, Tom Canton, that Arsenal will be Premier League champions this season?
It's easy to put it in a different way, I think. If Arsenal aren't Premier League champions this season, you have to ask what on earth has happened for that reality not to become the situation in May. I think that the belief is always a little bit hard for Arsenal fans because obviously what's happened over the last few seasons and how we haven't quite taken that step is always going to give that undertone that, well, what's going to happen this time to prevent Arsenal from lifting the trophy. But with the lead that we have now and with how the main two title rivals in Liverpool and Man City, and of course Chelsea now look even closer, but those two in particular, and how they've fallen off and lost at the games themselves at the weekend, you have to have that belief that Arsenal are going to go on and do it, I think, at this stage.
Chris, were you in the away end last night at the Emirates, or did you just stay at home and stay warm? Because no matter the situation and where you were, it would have been a tough pill to swallow losing 4-1 to your local rivals.
Yeah, I go home and away every game, don't ever miss one. And, it was painful yesterday at the Emirates. I would say I'm used to this, but we shouldn't be used to it. Going to the Emirates year after year. But in a North London derby, you expect passion, you expect desire, and you expect aggression in that game. And we deserve more. Thomas Frank and the players come out and apologised after the game, and rightly so. That wasn't anywhere near good enough, and we're slipping down that league table. And in some ways, this team at the moment is like watching Spurs back in the 90s. You don't know what you're going to get. Some of us are prepared to give Thomas Frank time. Some have given up already. We're just in that limbo stage at the moment where the players need to be better. We need a better squad. We need more money spent.
You said then that obviously some fans want to give him time. Some fans are sort of like done with him. Where do you stand on the whole situation? Are you in the middle, or have you picked a side yet?
I'm in the middle, but you cannot have games like this where you don't show any passion and desire. And we were so defensive yesterday. I don't know what the game plan was, because on Friday he said in the press conference, we're not going to go for a 0-0. I don't know what the game plan was at the Emirates. And, the last time I was on with you, Harry, was sadly the Chelsea defeat. And we broke a record then, XG record 0.07. In that first half, 0 shots on target, 0 shots. And the XG, we broke it again, was 0.
Tom, are you disappointed in Spurs in the sense that obviously you've won 4-1 and you've got the bragging rights, but at the same time, you still want a rivalry in a derby that has a bit of crunch to it. Do you know what I mean? But then slapping them 4-1, it's just a bit,
I don't want to see them relegated just because I'd rather they stayed in the league. So that evenings like yesterday could be a seasonal thing. But I was looking back at some of the games that Thomas Frank has come to the Emirates with his Brentford sides, and you look at the way those Brentford teams set up at Arsenal. It was to win those games. They set up to attack. They set up to frustrate Arsenal, to nick games, to nick goals. They frustrated Arsenal at the Emirates before. Arsenal have had far more competitive games against those Brentford sides than that particular Thomas Frank Tottenham side yesterday. So I thought it was baffling, the selection that he went with. I was chatting to a colleague of mine who covers Spurs, and he basically said that Danso was kind of in there solely for almost the long throw ability that he has. But Spurs never really got into any positions where, beyond a couple of occasions, where he was able to utilise that. So if that's the tactic, that's the strategy, then serious questions have to be asked of why the mindset was there to do that. Because Spurs, I think it was the first time in 14 years that neither of Harry Kane or Heung-min Son had been involved in one of these derbies. And I think that was so prevalent that there just seemed to be a lack of real talismanic figures in the Spurs team that were going to take a derby to Arsenal at the Emirates. But for Arsenal, it felt like that was the complete opposite. And there were so many big protagonists and characters that were going to take the game by the scruff of the neck, be that Ezra, of course, or be that Leandro Trossard, Declan Rice, Julian Timber, Saka, and the others that just had such good games, despite lacking, of course, several key starting figures from their usual 11 as well. It was night and day. You know, from a humble Arsenal perspective, I would have serious concerns from a Tottenham side of things.
Tom's only raised half a smile despite winning 4-1 yesterday. And even when walking back to the car, it was about a half-hour walk. And every Arsenal fan that I heard, it was just an expectation. It wasn't even a celebration from them fans yesterday. It was an expectation that they were going to roll Tottenham over, and they certainly did that. And, it would be Eze, wouldn't it? Of course, he should have been in a Spurs shirt, but it wasn't to be. And, to score a hat-trick just rubs salt into the wound even further.
Tom, that's what I was going to follow up and ask. There's something just so poetic, isn't there, about Eberechi Eze scoring that hat-trick yesterday. And it's a horror show for you, Chris, that obviously, like you mentioned, he was so close to joining Tottenham in the summer, but then all of a sudden he joins Arsenal, boyhood Arsenal fan at the same time, and then the first time they meet in the Premier League, Eberechi Eze goes and does that.
It also, in some ways, came out of nowhere because he's not had like a season where you'd pinpoint and say, we were leading up to where he was going to score a hat-trick in the derby, because there's been games where he's been very quiet. There's been games where he's kind of popped up with a big goal, like the 1-0 win over Crystal Palace, for example. And outside of that goal, didn't have an amazing game by any stretch of the imagination. So it was completely out the blue. And if this is the moment, of course, that kickstarts his kind of Arsenal career, then it's a great way to do it. But I think that the summer narrative that led into this strange scenario where I've never seen a player and the story around a transfer lengthened to a point where the sureness that people had that he was going to Tottenham at first evaporates so quickly, and it's a complete 180 turn to move to another club where the player has really been such a forceful kind of protagonist in speaking about wanting to move to Arsenal as well. And while he wanted to play it down for the game, I think it's very obvious from what Mikel Arteta was saying as well that it was always a desire to go to Arsenal. And it was almost like it was stringing Spurs along to a degree in the summer.
Chris, the Richarlison lob over David Raya, I don't think I've ever, and obviously the fans are well within their rights not to really celebrate it. I don't think I've ever heard an away end be so muted. I know obviously the deficit was the deficit at the same time, but I was there just like, did Spurs actually just score? Yeah, it was mental. I've never really seen an away end like that before.
Fair play to João Palhinha for winning the ball back.
Oh, crunching tackle.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Yeah, and what a finish it was from Richarlison. I wish that we would see a lot more from him. Certainly in the Spurs shirt. But as Tom said, when you've got no Son anymore, no Harry Kane anymore in these huge games, there's lack of firepower at the moment, and that is a real big issue. And I think that the whole of the Spurs fan base, including the away end, thought, well, we're never going to score again because we just didn't create anything in that match. And like I keep going back to the XG, these XG figures, we keep breaking records week after week in these huge games against our biggest rivals. This simply cannot happen. But, in my opinion, in the January window, we need to go out and sign a goal scorer. That is the number one priority, in my opinion.
Who is that? Who have you watched? Who have you, done the fan scout of? Who would take?
I've no idea. I've no idea. It's that is for the club to do, and that is for the club to, pull something out the bag and show ambition. Because, as I mentioned earlier, this feels like we're going downhill rapidly, and this cannot happen. This was meant to be a springboard winning the Europa League to go on to bigger and better things. And it seems like we're going downhill rather than, up the league table. And I didn't like Thomas Frank's attitude after, the game in the press conference saying, you've got to remember we finished 17th last year. That is not the attitude or not the message to give to the players or the fans.
Yeah, you can't be giving that sort of message out. And then it almost gives a look into being like, well, at least if we finish 16th, it's improvement on last year.
Exactly.
Absolutely not. A football club like Tottenham Hotspur is, traditional top 5, top 6. Let's be
I,
quite
I,
frank.
I get Harry, like he said in the press conference after the game as well, that we're 4 months into the project and Arsenal are, 5 years into the project. Let's be honest and frank about it. Spurs and Arsenal are miles apart in terms of quality, depth, etc., etc. And it looks like Arsenal are going to go on to big and better things than what Tottenham are doing right now. But we need to do things in a better way. The transfer windows need to be better. The board need to show ambition, and most importantly, Thomas Frank needs to get this right. He needs to get the best out of players. He needs to improve players. We talk about Eze. Arsenal went and signed Eze, who's been a real impact on the pitch, especially in this North London derby. And we went and bought Javi Simmons, who was a second half sub. So that's where we are at the moment.
Tom, I was outside the Emirates last night, and obviously I was speaking to a few fans, and obviously I mentioned what Arsenal fans can sometimes be like. But is this your best opportunity, do you think, for a very, very long time, not only to win the Premier League, but for, the potential of a double?
I think it absolutely has to be. Really, you look at every competition that Arsenal are in right now, and you're thinking who is going to beat them. They've got an interesting game in the Champions League on Wednesday against Bayern Munich, where arguably the two form teams in European competitions right now. But Arsenal have got that massive game against Chelsea on Sunday, so the Bayern game almost kind of gets put into a bit of a shadow from those two. But the Champions League and the Premier League are what Arsenal fans are looking at. The FA Cup, Arsenal, of course, have won in the last decade on numerous occasions. The League Cup, they've not won since the George Graham days. But either of those two competitions, I think, will be seen as kind of the elevating a Premier League title to something extra special. If it was just to be one of those two, or even just both of those two cup competitions, I think Arsenal fans would still end up being disappointed. And that's not being arrogant or hubristic or anything like that. It's about the fact that where these last 5 years has led to. If Arsenal win the title this season, it's not work that's been done over just a year. It's everything that's led up from the point that Mikel Arteta was appointed, all the transfers that have happened over the last 5 to 6 seasons to build a squad that can do it. Arsenal are top of the table right now and clear, despite not having so many of their key players for so many parts of the season. They didn't have Gabrielis. They didn't have a natural centre-forward available yesterday either. But players have stepped up. Players have moved into different roles, different moulds, and had to create moments despite not having the typical quality that they're familiar with and with each other. Saliba losing a player like Gabriel next to him, even though Hincapié is a great player to come in, that has a massive impact. Not having a traditional number 9 in Victor Gyökeres is tough. And just leading on from what Chris said as well about kind of the striker market, Arsenal didn't have, the Declan Rice of centre forwards to sign in the summer. That really was Alexander Isak, who was beyond Arsenal's kind of realm of spending. And the market for centre forwards right now is not forthcoming with amazing options. So for teams like Spurs that want to go out and bring in another centre forward to take them to that next step, Arsenal have struggled to do that with spending 60 million on Gyökeres and hasn't necessarily progressed that number 9 position as much as maybe we would like. We might see that come May, but right now haven't seen enough. And so that's going to be really hard for Spurs and any team that wants to sign a centre forward to change their fortunes.
Chris, just to finish off, mate, if Arsenal do win the Premier League or secure a double, if that's, not the traditional double like a Premier League and a League Cup, or the traditional double of the Premier League and the FA Cup,
I couldn't care less.
What country are you going to relocate to?
Yeah, that's a good question. Don't worry, we've got PSG next, a nice easy one.
Listen, Tom, Chris, thank you so much for your time this morning. Appreciate it massively. This episode of Settle the Score is sponsored by Sky Sports. Stream Sky Sports flexibly on Now. What you want, when you want, no fuss. Go to nowtv.com to start streaming Sky Sports today.